To whom much is given, much is required. Part of that requirement is sharing. Culture is the heartbeat within our lives, and it's at the core of so many things. While we live in a time when we are starving for wisdom, I welcome you to your wisdom retreat at Culture Raises Us. Donae Burston, today's guest, is founder and CEO of Fête Rosé, who launched this brand with the goal of creating a global wine label that spoke to his group of multi-ethnic and multi-generational friends. Donae has an extensive, to say the least, history of excellence within the wine industry with over 15 plus years experience working with some of the most iconic luxury brands like Dom Perignon, Moet Chandon, Veuve, Hennessy, just to name a few. And I want to welcome you sincerely to the show, bro. And before you provide us with a more kind of in-depth breakdown on you, we always start the conversation with this question. When you hear culture, what does that mean to you?
Oh, man. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here. I think when I hear culture, I think about those moments in life where I was present. I know it was transformative in terms of like what it was doing to the greater society. You think about some of the biggest events and the people, the impact on fashion. It's all those transformative moments that, quite frankly, Black people or the hip hop culture, or even there, I'm saying the word, but those sort of moments where the subculture has impacted the bigger, greater culture.
Yeah, and I love the focus that you put on it of, you know, our impact within it, which is very, very true and real. And, you know, as I hear you say that, you know, I realize the impact that someone like yourself is even having in that next chapter of how we're shaping culture, hence why it was so critical to have you on. Give the people a little bit more about yourself. I've had the pleasure of knowing you for some time, but I'd love for you to share a little bit more about you and your journey.
Yeah, man. I mean, listen, from Baltimore, Maryland. I went to college in Atlanta, Clark Atlanta University, with a dual degree in engineering and mathematics that encompassed me also going to Georgia Tech for a couple of years. Graduated from college, was all into the whole IT space, was the IT consultant for PricewaterhouseCoopers, but knew very quickly that wasn't the path for me. At the same time, the music scene and the music industry was burgeoning and quite frankly taking off in Atlanta. So it was very interesting for me to want to try to get into the entertainment industry some way, somehow. And the spirits industry was just starting to really embrace music and the culture. And Atlanta was a hotbed of activity. And I started to see the spirits, wine and spirits was an easy entree into, quote unquote, the industry without it being so industry.
Right.
Yeah, so I signed on board as an ambassador, first working for D Rush, which was Donnie Deutsch and Russell Simmons' agency on the Cavassier program. So I did that for a year or so and then moved over to, at the time, Shefflin in Somerset, which was managing the Moet Hennessy business. So I was one of the very first Hennessy Cognac and Moet Chandon ambassadors in the entire country. I think it was 4 of us, and I was assigned to Atlanta at the time to really get the brands ingratiated with the community and be a part of everything that was happening in Atlanta. And then from there, I think I grew out of that position a little bit and went to Heineken to work on the African-American promotions and sponsorship business for about a year with somehow, other friends that have worked in that.
That's right. I almost forgot about that chapter. I mean, you've got so many chapters. I forgot the Heineken. That's right.
That was a short stint. I realized really quickly I wasn't a beer guy. So then you came back to more Hennessy brands at the time, and then was in Miami, was asked to come down and run the Hennessy Cognac business, which I did for a number of years, and then made the pivot to work on some of the more general market brands, that being Belvedere, Veuve Clicquot, Dom Perignon, and Moet Chandon. Did that for a very long time, and then went 3 years working for Champagne Armand de Brignac, aka Ace of Spades, and then here we are today with Lafette Wine Company.
Yeah, having known you for a very, very long time and watching your journey, especially during that LVMH chapter, it'd be very easy to look at you and say, yo, he's got it good there. And he's making inroads of progression, which would lead to the whole, why would you ever leave there mentality, right? And you obviously represent for me the great example of the culture of betting on oneself.
Absolutely.
and doing it in spaces that truly bring you a level of joy and achievement. And I want to applaud you for wanting more and stepping out for more, right?
Yeah.
And as I even listened, remember, like the Heineken thing, I even forgot about. But with all the brands and the products you've worked with over the years, was there a particular moment where you realized just how big and instrumental this spirits industry and culture was and is to our overall culture as we know it today?
Yeah, I'd have to say it was those early years in Atlanta working on Hennessy and Moet. If you think about back then, this is 2001 to 2003. Those parties were some of the best parties across the country when they were launching new brands or new advertising campaigns, those sort of things. They always had a live entertainment component with a burgeoning or existing hot artists, and everybody would come to those sort of parties. And if you fast forward, to the late 2000s, that was the model that luxury brands started taking in general, right? They just said
Mm,
the same sort of high party, replicating what they saw with these, brands that were traditionally targeted towards the urban consumer, mainly cognac brands. And they started making those fashion week parties. Those were the launches for the new spring line, or you saw car companies do it. And I think that's the part of culture that I saw happen that came out of the wine and spirits industry for sure.
yeah, and I remember that time, very clearly because it was part of our daily DNA
Yeah,
to a degree. And watching all these different worlds come together to create this overall culture that we know is leading everything in society. Like, let's be 1,000% clear, leading everything in
absolutely.
society. So it's critical that you identified that point where it was almost like the Avengers
Yes,
coming to get all these different superpowers of spirits, fashion, music, sport through the lens of, underrepresented voices who became the voices, to then create this superpower of culture that we know today.
sorry about
So
that.
I talked about, your time at LVMH and your ability to step away, for more. And I'd love for you to share what was that pivotal moment that kind of led you to bet on yourself and take this leap into entrepreneurship and leaving behind what many would call the comfort of a corporate gig.
Yeah, I think for me, it really stemmed from the fact that I had been in Miami for so long working on these brands. And ultimately, Miami's still a nightclub town or was a nightclub town. So everything that revolved around the LVMH brands was associated with primarily nightclubs. And it had gotten old to me. I was getting, quite frankly, bored. And I had been there so long, it was probably 10 years at that point. I didn't want the brands to be my calling card, like Donae with
Mm, that's right.
Moet. I wanted kind of the one to stand out on my own. So I'd already started to pull back in terms of going to nightclubs. It would only kind of show up when people were in town, etc. But when I asked for a bigger position, a position that would allow me to really have a seat at the table to kind of give input to the global strategy or the U.S. based strategy, I was denied, and I was denied because they were pegging me as the nightclub guy, which is interesting
Mm,
because listen, I'm in a city that's based upon nightlife. You come out with a bottle that lights up for the nightclub, but then I get stigmatized as the nightclub guy.
that's
Um,
right.
so at that point, I knew that there was a ceiling for me there. So I had to start looking for other opportunities.
Yeah, and I think obviously that then births the baby and the child of Lafette that you are working on. And as we get into that a little bit, I'd love to hear how that materialized even more. But I want to start with the convincing of investors,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. See, look at the smile. Look at the $1 million smile comes out with that, because this in itself is a whole thing. The convincing of investors to believe
Mhm.
in a new and innovative concept like Lafette Rosé must have come with a ton of challenges, right? What strategies did you kind of employ to communicate your vision effectively and kind of secure the necessary support to bring your brand to life?
I think the first thing was I understood from very early on that they were betting on me as a founder and not so much the idea.
Boom.
So I knew I had to really sell. I became a salesperson. I had to sell the idea and sell what I was believing what could happen. But it was also the business proposition, right? I wholeheartedly believe that with Nectar Imperial Rosé from Moet being the number one rosé sparkling brand in the United States, and knowing that the majority of those consumers were Black and Hispanic or brown people, the business proposition was for me is if I can go grab a market share, 10% market share of that sparkling rosé wine drinker and bring it to still wine from Provence, that I had a business case. So I think between that interesting proposition and really having that data, and also really them just believing in me. And luckily, I was able to go to people that I'd had relationships with in Miami over the years
That's
uh,
right.
that saw the work that I had done. So it wasn't cold calling, so to speak, but they were certainly betting on the work that I had previously done, the knowledge of what the business proposition was, and then me myself, as they say, the jockey and not the horse.
Well, no, listen, and again, I told you from the beginning, your story of betting on oneself is a huge, huge component that needs to be shared because you also mentioned something that I'm learning and hearing more and more as you talk about investments and people investing in propositions. And the thing that you started with is exactly what I'm hearing and seeing more is that people don't invest in a concept or a brand.
No.
They are investing in the individual.
Yep.
So you had to not sell yourself, but essentially it's what you bring to the table that then makes for all the analytics, all the vision, and all the things that you brought to the table with this amazing idea. We're taking nothing away from that to
Absolutely.
then be the thing that people want to commit to. And
Absolutely.
it starts with you. And I think the more people can understand that, the more founders we can start seeing in the marketplace like yourself. So I'm so
Yeah.
glad and happy that you led with that piece. And
Yeah.
so now
It
that you have
was-
this, how do you define this cultural impact that you aim to kind of make through with your brand? And what role do you see Fête Rosé playing in redefining the wine and rosé category?
Yeah, I think for me, it was first of all, let's remove all the stigmas that have been taught to us about wine, right? There's a lot of formalities that just have been passed down and passed down from somm to person to consumer that are not really true or not necessary. It's actually a way of gatekeeping. So one of the first things we wanted to do was to remove that stigma of how you're supposed to do things and operate much more like a lifestyle brand versus a wine brand. So
Mm,
a lot of things we do are non-traditional. I mean, from, black labels on a rosé wine bottle, that was unheard of. People were like, what are you doing? Showing multicultural people in our brand imagery. Nowadays in 2023, that's common. But when we came out with the idea and launched in 2019, you certainly didn't see men and people of color in rosé wine ads. You just didn't. So it's all about playing against that sort of thing of what we wanted, us as friends and people we know, of how we operated, was to really bring that to the wine category and to say, yes, you can put ice cube in it because that's what they do in France. It was always about being controversial and making it comfortable for the non-traditional wine consumer to consume wine in any environment or how they wanted to, for that matter.
so tell me this, because you just mentioned something about the black label. What was the issue? What was the whole thing with a black label on a bottle?
All rosé wine bottles typically were white or white with some sort of pink in them. So here we come with this
Wow.
graphite gray label with gold embossing, and people would just be like, "Oh, the label's black. You need something that's a little bit more bright, makes people feel, summery, so to speak." Because at the same time, rosé wine traditionally was only marketed during the warm weather months, which is something else we wanted to change and be like, "No, there's
That's
no
right.
seasonality with rosé. You drink it all year round if you want to." So those sort of things were certainly some of the pushback we had, and we did it intentionally, and we continue to do things that are non-traditional to push the envelope and kind of piss people off a little bit.
Yeah, and if you call it pissing people off, it sounds like just being a disruptor brand, right? Stepping into a space, having a point of view, you have the expertise, you have the resources. Why not?
Yeah,
That's just an opportunity. I look at it more like nobody's been doing it before, so why not step into the space and do that? It's so crazy that it's perceived as these were the holy grails of not to do, when
exactly.
actually it's the opportunity for somebody to step in to do, like yourself, who's an innovator, who has a vision, who has the expertise and the experience
Yep.
to say why not,
Yep.
and
And
why not it be us.
it takes a confident person to be able to do that, because the industry, I heard so much no, this, that if I had listened to the industry, we wouldn't be where we are today, because I heard so many no's about everything we wanted to do very early on that it could have been discouraging.
Right. And a lot of what you mentioned when you talk about the things that you are doing and the things that were not happening prior, it's really about it's storytelling, right?
Yeah.
And your brand obviously places a strong emphasis, I think, on experiences and storytelling. How do you curate and craft these experiences to kind of resonate with your target audience and create a lasting connection with them? I kind of feel like it's a rhetorical question because you've made mention of it, but I'd love to hear from you how this curation happens.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things we learned early on, or I learned early on, is that it's not what you say, it's how you make people feel, right? And I think about all the great events that I've ever gone to or experiences I've ever had. It's about the feeling I left that said event or experience with. So for us, we always want to do that. We want to do that sort of touching and feeling to let people really understand the brand from a emotional standpoint and not so much from in your face branding standpoint. So everything we do, especially when we do events, is like, how do we make sure every touch point leaves the people feeling good about something? And it's hard to explain, but it's just like when we get into the event mode, myself and the team, we know the points that are going to really resonate with people. We did an event recently in Atlanta, and it was like, let's just have free flowing oysters and French fries. And it
Right.
sounds small, but like that's a touch point for some people to be like, damn, they just had. I've never been to an event, especially a rosé wine event that's owned by a Black person, and they have top tier oysters, caviar, and French fries flowing. You make the guests feel good. It makes them feel important, and that you really want to embrace them and bring them into the brand. And they walk away talking about that experience forever. And that's something we try to do with everything.
Yeah, well, it's about creating experience. You're
Yeah.
not in the business of having a transaction.
No.
you, you're in the business of creating an experience. And when you said, it's kind of hard for you to articulate because it's innate in you, it's what you've lived. It goes back all the way to the Miami days and all the other days of being in experiences or in spaces where it was just that, an experience. And for
Absolutely.
those who don't know, we're talking to the uppity. I'm not even going to the rest of the old handle of this, but this is not a surprise of the level of excellence that you're delivering, not only within the tangible product, but also within the experiences that you're creating.
Yeah.
So, and that's why I said it's kind of like a rhetorical question for me, knowing you, knowing how you move, knowing the industry and the experience and the things you've been around. This all makes sense. But I'd love for other people to hear how you translate it into that storytelling because it is so huge. And I look at the entrepreneurial piece of this, right? And entrepreneurship, for lack of a better term, no pun intended, ain't rosy. That part. And often it involves, navigating, many uncertainties and setbacks. I'd love for you to share, moments that you faced while building Fête Rosé and how you overcame or grew from it to further build the muscle of what you definitely have to have of resilience and determination.
Yeah, I think the biggest one, and probably for a lot of people, was certainly the pandemic. I think for us,
Right.
when I launched the brand, we were primarily an on-premise brand. That means sold in the restaurants and hotels and stuff like that. So we were really just getting our footprint set in Miami and were then expanding to New York. And then the world shut down. And at that point, none of us knew what was going to really happen. But for me in particular, I knew that my business was based upon outside, so to speak. Right? We weren't going outside. So after some reflection of figuring out what we can do, it involved canceling orders of the next batch of wine in France and really just doing some self-reflection about what we can do. Luckily, at the same time, e-commerce was taking off for wine brands, which traditionally wasn't a big thing. So we immediately jumped into that. And through the grace of God and some good friends, we were able to get some product to some influential people throughout the pandemic that helped raise the profile of the brand. And it just really helped us take off, or I should say maintain, not even take off. But it was certainly a troubling time because everything was shut down. So it was myself as the only employee of the company at the time trying to figure out what can be done to keep Lafette going when the entire, again, proposition of the business was gone.
Being outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what's so funny? You say that, but then as I look back, I remember that time because I think what you're also not mentioning is the village that galvanized around ensuring that you were set up for success. So
Absolutely.
I could speak for myself. I ordered immediately cases of
Yes.
rosé from you that, I'm not a rosé drinker, but I am now, but I only drink one. I literally no, but this is part of the responsibility that we have, that the burden of you becoming successful should not just be on your shoulders alone.
I agree.
It should be on all of ours to ensure that we're providing you with the support, the resources, the guidance, all the things to help you become what we all know you have the potential, or the brand has the potential to become. So I'm so glad that you use this as the point where all could have gone bad, because this was a business proposition that was built off of being outside.
Yeah.
But the outside that we knew changed to being inside while being outside, where our brother like D Nice was creating, experiences for us in home, for us to all feel like we were all still together. And it took all of us to now say, all right, well, Donae's launching this rosé brand. We got to order the bottles and bring them in to our home, and create our outside inside.
Absolutely.
And so with that, it's kind of crazy. And look how God works. It just gave you another muscle.
Yeah.
He gave you another muscle, because you had this whole other muscle that you have already been training and working out for the outside game and the experience. Now you have this internal muscle of the inside outside piece of this, which is amazing. And so now I look at, so your vision for wine and the rosé category is obviously undoubtedly unique. I mean, you talk about all the things that you took to heart of, well, we're going to do it differently from how it's historically been done. How do you see the Fête Rosé now shaping the future of this industry from a consumer experience standpoint? And I didn't notice, I'm picking my words very, very carefully. Shaping, not being a part of.
Yeah.
Shaping.
Yeah, I think one of the things that certainly I've helped to shape is the idea that Black Americans are now making wines outside of the United States and bringing them here, right? I think for so long, it was domestic wines that were owned by Black people. And to see what I've heard from consumers and feedback, to see a Black person go to France and start a wine label by himself and then bring it to the United States, it shows a number of things. Like, the world really is your oyster, right? We can really do things and operate in different cultures. I don't speak French. I've worked around French people for a very long time. But so I think it's that sort of business connectivity as well that's very inspirational to people. And it's the idea of, like, I didn't just go to California, I went to France, right? That's very inspirational for people. So I think, one, showing the industry, like, be on notice. Black people are getting into wine, and we're going to go discover wine and wine regions, and we're going to take charge, and we're going to lead those brands to be top selling, top performing brands. It's certainly that. And then also that I'm trying to build a team of non-traditional wine employees within Lafette, right? To really diversify the industry. So we want to be that engine as well, as where we bring people in, you train them up, and they can go off and do whatever. They don't have to necessarily stay with us. So it's twofold. One, of shaking up what's traditionally been the wine industry for Black people, being an international success, and then certainly trying to be that pipeline to create more opportunities for people of color.
I love that. And your story is such a testament to following, one's passion, and kind of forging this unique path, which you just even alluded to with the things that you're trying to create in terms of, non-conventional hires and thinkers. What advice would you now give to aspiring entrepreneurs? Because I think you have a great deal to offer there, who are kind of hesitant to leave, the security of traditional corporate roles to pursue their own ventures.
Yeah, I think you have to listen to yourself. You have to listen to that instinct. Certainly, I wasn't ever really ready until the moment I was ready, and it's because I began to listen to something inside of myself that was saying that I was no longer fulfilled. Now, that being said, I didn't just jump out and say I'm going to go start a cookie company, because that wasn't in my wheelhouse, right? So
that's right.
So if you're going to go be an entrepreneur, make sure you know that business you're trying to get into in and out as much as you possibly can. So you go into it not facing some of the barriers you would if you had no clue, because entrepreneurship is hard, and nobody's going to teach you, and nobody wants to coach you. You're going to hear a lot of no's. So having that foundation of understanding the business you really want to get into is crucial. So knowing excuse my language for better words, knowing your shit. You have to. I think that's where a lot of times in the Instagram generation is, we think we can just jump out there and start these brands. But I think the most successful people are those that either learn that particular segment of the business themselves, or they hire the right people. And we have to do that as entrepreneurs. Any day now, and if I figure out, or I feel that I'm no longer the best effective CEO, I'll step away from my own company to make sure that I'm putting people in place that's going to really take it to the next level.
Well, that's another key discipline of knowing when to say when, right?
Yeah.
Which is a beautiful art form. And we're not even going to talk about that because you have a long runway. before that happens. But there is something else. No, seriously. But I mean, being able to know that that could be an option, right?
Yeah.
That might need that's a possibility. Like if I'm not able to deliver at the level for what this brand experience deserves, I have to have the knowing to be able to say I'm open to stepping aside and empowering somebody else to do so. No, that's huge. So I applaud you for that. But you said something else. The power to push through the nose.
Yeah.
What do you do, or what have you done, or what muscle have you built to help with that? And I ask that because even I look at my oldest daughter who sings and acts and goes on all these auditions, and she gets hundreds of no's
Yes.
before she gets the
Yes.
yes, and she's had to build this thick skin or tolerance, whatever you want to call it. I would love to get a sense from you. What's the thing that you do, or the things that you do to continue to push through the no, in knowing that the yes is where you need to be and what's needed for this vision to come to life?
Yeah, I think the first thing is not about what happened to you, is how you recover. So you hear the no, you can live in it
Mm,
for a moment, and then you have to move on, right? You have to train ourselves to move on pretty fast. The second thing is I always remind myself is that no isn't a definite no. It's a no, not right now. So I always revisit,
that's
like people
right.
that say no to me, like I've gone back and hit them every month. One person said, "You're the most persistent MF I've ever seen." I'm going to say yes, just because you don't give up. And it's not done in a bad way, but it's certainly like I'm still just checking in. I'm still just sending him new updates, on what's going on with the brand, etc. So I think it's those two things: is recover and recover fast. Take your moment, take the no, like it'll be the hit, and then move on to the next. And then certainly revisiting certain opportunities that you can to see if that no is now a yes at a later date.
The revisit is a pivot. That's a great pivot. And initially when we first started this conversation, and you talked about the moment when you realized how critical this spirits industry and culture is to overall culture, the epicenter of that you spoke about was Black culture
Mhm.
and the impact that Black culture has within all that. And as we know, Black culture is quite often borrowed and appropriated, or used to inspire other cultures and industries. Talk about the importance now, especially in your seat, of Black ownership
Yeah.
and recognition of what it is that the Black community has kind of brought to not only this country but the world.
Yeah, I think Black ownership is very important for just creating that ecosystem, right? We're one of the few minority groups that really keep the dollars being able to circulate in the community. I know we hear that a lot, but it's true. We have to be much more intentional about that, and Black ownership is a part of that. But the other part is we can't be owners just for the sake of being owners, right? It has to be something tangible there. I think a lot of
Mm,
times, especially in this business that I deal with, I get asked the question of will I ever sell, and the answer is yes, because I can have 100% of nothing, or I can have 20% of something else, build some wealth, and be able to go do more and
mm,
create more business and do it over and over again. I think, traditionally we look at our grandparents, some of the people we knew owning businesses back in the day, they held them to the point that they were no longer valuable. And we got to know when it's time to let go and
right.
pivot or bring people on board um, to do so. That being said, I think it's also important for Black ownership and Black businesses to go out and start to make strategic partnerships to increase the pie and opportunity for Black people in general to continue in certain areas of business around the world. And I think that's what Black VCs and Black investment bankers and stuff like do a very good job of. You know, I don't have to have it all, but I can get a significant amount of money, and then I can go create other opportunities for more Black people.
So is that kind of one of the ways that you see us being recognized and celebrated outside of just the capital and equity? And do you feel like we're close to getting the proper recognition that we should?
I think what's important is that we begin to live outside of certain industries that have traditionally just been the ones that we've had succeeded in, which is usually sports and entertainment, right? So I think
Mm,
when you see Black ownership, it's important for us to dive or to promote those that are in non-traditional industries, so the world sees that we're not just athletes and entertainers. I think that's a huge part of it. Um, are we getting that recognition? Still one or two of us, but I don't think it's broad across the board yet, because we still only have a small percentage of share in any particular industry overall.
are you inspired by anybody outside of your industry?
Oh man, yeah. Quite frankly, I'm really inspired by the work that actually Matty Johnson does. But more importantly, like I went to a birthday party of his, and he literally stood up and he said, "If you're in this room, at some point we're going to all make money together." And I think, and not so in a trivial
Wow.
nature of like, let's just go get money, but he means the connectivity of we're all here and we have to generate ideas and wealth and share and let's all build. And I think that was super inspirational for me to look around and see 125 of his closest friends. I wasn't one of the closest friends. I just happened to be there. But to make a statement
Hmm.
like that, I think that's very inspirational for me because I would love to do that. Build these networks of friends and how do we all, so to speak, get money together.
Yeah, I call that a spider web that he
Yeah.
threw out right at that moment. Where as you being the 126, I think you were number 126,
Yeah.
125 as you mentioned. That, but no, but to be within that spider web and have the thoughtful nature of somebody who's being super intentional
Yeah.
with saying, "Hey, look, yeah, we're celebrating a birthday, but more importantly, what we're going to do is we're going to continue to have this impact of our culture in all these different areas by all of us figuring out ways to
Mhm.
work together and make money together." Like,
Absolutely.
but and to your point, I see why you would say a Magic Johnson, right? Who also has, you talk about the things that you'd like to see of doing things outside of the areas that we've been kind of stereotyped
Mhm.
to excel in. Is he not the perfect example of that?
Absolutely. 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 Yeah.
I mean, like he
Construction,
exemplifies every bit of
airport
that comment
concession.
that you made.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Come on, movie theater. I mean, like all the things.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful example and blueprint for us to be able to reference and learn from and thrive from. So I'm glad that that touched you so much, being in that environment, and I can't wait to see what that turns into.
Yeah.
But now look, we're doing the opening scene of your life documentary, bro, because we're gonna create a life documentary about you at some point. And it's about to begin. What
Yeah.
song is playing and why?
Oh man, that's a tough one, bro. That is a
Yeah.
I would have to say something like maybe like Touch the Sky. Kanye West, Touch the
Okay.
Sky. Yeah.
Why?
Because I envision this dramatic, like, and the south of France is my favorite place. And this is going to sound real ostentatious, but I don't care. Like, big ass yacht going across the
I know you
Mediterranean.
don't, by the way. I know you don't.
Yacht on the Mediterranean, me, my family, my kids, all of us on the boat and just, jetting off and just having a great time in the Med, living life. Yeah. But that's just representative of like the freeness of knowing I've made it, of success. Not in a materialistic way, but just like that feeling like I've touched the sky. I've made it. My family's happy. We're free. We can do amazing, great things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you also just hit on something when you talk about success, right? Because we always go to monetary for the most part when we talk about success. But you, again, it was an experience and a feeling,
Yeah.
which I'm sure you're already seeing and feeling some of that success as during the journey. No, during the journey. I mean, so often we don't talk about the journey. People just see the end goals or the
Yeah.
beginning and then the end,
Yeah.
right? And you talked about social media earlier, which does a really good job of highlighting those things, more so the ending, right? The on top, like I made it, did this or whatever, and that's supposed to be the success moment. But we all know there's so many more moments in between in the journey. The journey is really the success story. It's not
Absolutely.
the destination. And
Absolutely.
so I know you've still been on many boats with your good friends and family, and you felt that moment. And you're gonna be able to live a life of that. But I'm glad that you mentioned that it wasn't rooted in this monetary point that you're
No.
looking to reach because it's so much bigger than that.
100%. 100%. Yeah, definitely
So
for me,
much,
especially
so
being
much.
able to provide experiences. To you mentioned I've had a lot of tremendous experience in my life with a lot of network of people that have let me see things, and I want to provide that for all of
Yeah.
my friends and family. I want them to see what I've seen because it has been so transformative and inspirational in my life across the board. To want to even do this for that matter. So yeah,
Mm. Well, look, we normally end these sessions with, asking the question about what are the three seeds you'd want to leave with the stewards of culture moving forward? Because obviously we make the correlation to planting a seed, watering it, nurturing it, so it becomes this amazing, amazing thing that you've envisioned. I'd love to get from you, what are the three things that just pop into your head off the top that you think are fundamentally the key components you feel for individuals moving forward to kind of shape this thing called culture moving forward?
To recognize and be okay with cultures ever evolving. I think that's, we sometimes say this is culture. You don't want to let it move outside of that box. It's always, everything we do is always evolving. So being open to change and that evolution is certainly one of them. Culture is also the same way our culture is taken and appropriated. We can take others' culture and experiences and appropriate them as well. So I would tell everyone to experience and do as much as you can when the opportunity presents themselves, because what it does to you as a person will have an ultimate larger effect on the community and the culture that you're from. And then three is don't sell it out. Don't sell it out.
Mm.
Yeah.
Man, listen, I could have this conversation with you. I could have this conversation with you for a very long time because, for one, your journey has been one that's super inspiring and it will continue to be.
Thank you.
Two, super proud of where you are and, more importantly, where you're going. And then three, I think there's so many people that can benefit from this. So I want to thank you dearly for sharing your time, sharing your story, being transparent, being open to be an example that many can look after and look to for inspiration within their respective journeys. And I look forward to the day that you have your birthday party and you're standing up on stage and you're looking out at everybody and you say, hey, look, thank you all for coming. But I look forward to the day where we're all going to be making money together on whatever thing that we decide to do.
Absolutely. It's coming. And thank you, HC. Thank you so much for having me, man. I've had a great time and you will definitely be at the party. We will definitely hear that speech from me for sure.
That's right, bro. I appreciate you, bro.
Thanks, man.
We truly appreciate your support because it helps us fulfill our mission of promoting cultural awareness and personal development. Please click the subscribe button below to help ensure and solidify our mission.